Everybody, this is just a quick video showing you who's going at each position in these rookie mock drafts. If you think you know who's going to go at this position, leave a comment down below. Who do you think it's going to be? And see if any of my guests who've been on agree with you. And before we get into it, hey, hit that like, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe. We're on a march towards, 500 subscribers. I'd love to be able to do it before we get into this season of football. That'd be awesome. So help me out and let's go. Let's see who's going at this draft pick, shall we? Who's following them up at the third pick of the first round?
So I'm going to get a little bit more chalky here, and I'm going to go. This is when I think I am really struggling with the next two picks because they don't really separate a lot for me, but I'm going to just get it out of the way. My 103 is Bryce Young. He was a 101 to Carolina.
Yep.
And before the draft, I probably would have said I was comfortable taking JSN as my 102 because I really loved him. And then, but here I'm going Bryce Young at the 103. And he, the way I approach quarterbacks, the main inputs that I care about are experience, efficiency and accuracy, and then rushing ability. That's kind of how and age too. So those five things are the main pillars or the main tenets of my QB philosophy. It's after Jim Sonis, the number fire analyst who's really good at evaluating quarterbacks. I really took a lot of what he does for quarterback evaluation. And, Young, he has the experience. He's a young, it sounds weird to say Young is a young quarterback, but he's not an older quarterback. He's not the youngest quarterback ever to come out or anything, like that, but he's a decent, good age, experience, very efficient quarterback, and he's an accurate passer. The only problem, the really ding, is the size and the rushing production. Really, I think that hurts his ceiling, and that's, to be honest, the ceiling of these quarterbacks is what kind of made Jahmyr Gibbs push up to 102 for me. So Gibbs is, so Young, while I think he's ultimately in the best, the most likely outcome for me is he's going to be a high-end QB1 or high-end QB2 or low-end QB1 for superflex purposes. And that's why I bumped him down to 103, is that you're lacking the upside, you're lacking the pizzazz. And also, too, sometimes you get these quarterbacks who struggle early on. And while they still maintain a decent value, running backs have consistently shown that, hey, when they hit, they really pay off on that ROI. That kind of factor into it here. But the real tiebreaker for me, though, between my next pick and in CJ Stroud and Bryce Young is the decision-making ability for Bryce Young and his ability to handle pressure. That's what everyone raves about, is Bryce Young's ability to, when things collapse and his ability off of script, he operates very well on script and in timing, but when it breaks down, he can handle it. He keeps his eyes upfield and he still hits people, makes incredible throws. And that's kind of what does it for me.
Let's see who follows up at the 1-3 then.
Yeah, so this was actually my QB1 before the NFL draft, and as I mentioned, with the reasons for Anthony Richardson, he's now moved up to the top of that. But I still, as I said, I think this is a tier altogether with these three quarterbacks. But the guy that I lean more to now is CJ Stroud. As I mentioned, he was my QB1 before the NFL draft. He just feels like that more NFL ready quarterback. He feels like he could probably be the best NFL quarterback out of these guys. And I think for fantasy, you do have to consider that while it's a completely different game, obviously we're getting points for different things, not for winning games. I feel like CJ Stroud, if you've got that solid quarterback that's going to have that longevity in the NFL, that's something you need in fantasy with quarterbacks. We've seen it time and again with quarterbacks where they could dip in value if they're struggling when they come in as rookies. But for me, CJ Stroud, his accuracy is easily the best quarterback in terms of accuracy for me out of this class. And what he's done over at Ohio State has been incredible. Now I know the situation he was in with the wide receivers he has had the pleasure of playing with for his college career has obviously helped that. But I think a lot of it could do with CJ Stroud and his ability as well. I think he's definitely helped these wide receivers in terms of their college career as well. So I absolutely love CJ Stroud. I love the fact that he was picked second overall, because obviously there was the rumors that he could potentially be one that slipped in the NFL draft. So to get that locked in second overall pick in the NFL draft, going to the Texans is great for me. And I mentioned this on another podcast as well recently, is I think the fact that the Texans were willing to give up their first round pick to take the third overall pick in the NFL draft is a real vote of confidence behind CJ Stroud. They obviously believe in him and this team and what they can do next year, for the fact that they're willing to give up their first next year. So I feel like that's another sign of confidence in Stroud, and they obviously really like him as a quarterback. So again, that's just elevating my trust in him. And as I say, I think he's going to be a real safe quarterback in fantasy. Probably a high-end QB too, maybe a little bit more ceiling to that as well. But I think he's a solid pick at the 103.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some unlocking new levels kind of potential there as well. I'm not sure if I'm fully correct in this, but just the way Ohio State seemed to run their offense, they kind of put a bit of a leash on their quarterbacks. We've seen it with Justin Fields, obviously. So CJ Stroud, if he's kind of allowed by Houston to kind of move around a little bit more and use his legs a bit more, that could push his ceiling up even further. So yeah, I do like that. I think that's a really good point. I heard you say that was that on the Fantasy Sanctuary you said that? I think it was.
It was. Yeah.
I think I heard you say that, and I was like, actually, that's a really good point. That's a huge, stamp of approval with CJ Stroud. It's like, we don't need that 24 pick. We're going to be picking last.
Well, I mean, they do have the Browns pick, but they do have the Brown pick still. But I think I do believe it was their own that they used. So I think that's a real vote of confidence behind Stroud.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm not going to change my rankings, although these two are pretty back to back. I'm going to stick with CJ Stroud.
Yep.
Just because I don't think much has changed, and actually the talk with the pre NFL draft was CJ Stroud was going to be the quarterback that was going to fall out of the top 5, possibly top 10. But for him to be taken at pick 2, and then the Texans traded the absolute haul to get back to pick 3, just shows how much or how invested they are in CJ Stroud. Rightly so. I think he is the guy that's going to turn around the franchise. Not saying that he's top. His ceiling is probably top 7, top 8 in terms of the quarterback rankings, which some people might not like the fact that they're going to be drafting a guy this high that probably hasn't got the ceiling that Richardson has. But I think he's just so safe. I think his value is going to carry him through. I think with the Texans, they're going to give him a run of 2 to 3 years to really show what he can do. So I think he's incredibly safe. They've got a decent O-line, not really got great weapons. I'd rather they didn't trade their first round pick away next year. I mean, that could have been someone like a Marvin Harrison, which is a massive shame. But I still think that the floor is there with CJ Stroud, and he's going to be a really safe quarterback in the future.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that the Texans kind of really making a point, like in the offseason, to make sure that offensive line was, as good as they could make it probably for CJ Stroud. That's pretty good for him. And while there's no real standout weapons there, someone like Robert Woods, that's a safe pair of hands there, right? That can get a couple of targets to CJ Stroud. And hopefully, fingers crossed for his fantasy production, the fact that there isn't that many weapons, he might, open up. He might run a little bit, which would be perfect for him, right?
We know he can do it. We saw it in that game was against Georgia that he can do it, and I think that he will have to do it in the NFL. They've got some sneaky weapons. Couple Tank Dell that they picked this year. See John Mechie coming back is decent because I was pretty high on him last year. So we'll see how it goes. But in terms of long term value for Stroud, I think he's going to pretty much stay around the quarterback 10 to 15 for 2 to 3 years. So a pretty safe prospect to get here.
Exactly. If you do it against Georgia, you can do it against the Eagles pretty much, right? So that's perfect, right?
Easy.
Yeah. Let's go to pick 1-3. I went Anthony Richardson. Who's following up after good old Floppy, right? Fucking hell.
I'm gonna say CJ Stroud.
Right, CJ Stroud, we'll get him locked in. This is pretty much it. This is very, very common from what I've seen so far. We got
mate.
Yeah.
Like I said to you, the first 6 picks are very chalky. To be honest, mate, I could have sat here and reeled off the first 6 picks, and we could have gone straight to 7.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that would have been. I think most people would have gone, yeah, we know why they're going there. We know who's going there. We know everything about it. But I prefer CJ Stroud to Bryce Young as well.
Yeah, I just think there's more upside with CJ Stroud. That doesn't mean I don't like Bryce Young. I just think, yeah, there's more upside with Stroud.
So we'll go straight into the 103. And who's your guy at 103?
Yeah, a 103 staying very, very similar to what you had. Now on YouTube, it's been a week since you've seen Paul on this draft. It's been about 20 minutes for us in real life. We're recording back to back here. We're putting in a shift, all right? So for a week for you, I remember exactly what he's picked, all right? I still have the tab open on the screen. So I'm going with the same guy, CJ Stroud. And spoiler, I'm gonna have the same guys for a while. But I've got CJ Stroud locked in at 3. Mainly, not because I think CJ Stroud is a better quarterback than Bryce Young. I'm not saying that. But I think CJ Stroud is a better fantasy quarterback than Bryce Young. What Bryce Young is going to need to do to become a relevant fantasy quarterback that's going to win you championships is he's going to need to be Drew Brees. He's going to need to be Tom Brady. He's going to need to be historically good at throwing the football because he ain't rushing it because he'll die. Like, he cannot leave that pocket, or he will not be Bryce Young anymore. He'll be Bryce old and dead. He is not leaving the pocket. Okay, so he's going to really, really be super elite at throwing the ball, which he could be, but CJ Stroud doesn't have to be, super, super elite throwing the ball. He has to use his legs like we know he can. We've seen it done before against Georgia, of all people, so we know he can run against the Eagles, right? So all he's got to do is be accurate with the ball, run a little bit, and he's going to outscore Bryce Young most years. So I just think Stroud has got an easier path to becoming successful fantasy-wise. Wouldn't shock me if Bryce Young ends up being the better quarterback, in terms of the NFL and actually lasting longer in the league.
Yeah. A smart guy came on here 20 minutes ago and picked exactly the same guy at 103. So I'm not going to disagree with you, but yeah, I agree in the terms of Bryce Young can be the better thing, but like what you were saying about like Zach Wilson and players like that, he was the number 2 overall pick. How many number 1 overall picked QBs have we seen leave their team so quickly after because they haven't hit,
Yeah.
And we could see that with Bryce Young. It could be a case of, if he can't, like you said, if he can't throw the ball that well, he could be somebody that comes a bit stuck in this NFL. He's got no rushing upside. He can't throw the ball that well. What's he bring to the field? So I agree with you that Stroud is a little bit above him here, to be fair. But